Hi there, welcome to or welcome back to Tiff Reads Books, where I read books and then I talk to you about them. Today I'm going to talk to you about something a little bit different. I stepped out of my comfort zone, and not only did I read a romance, I read a paranormal romance. And I'm going to tell you my opinions on it, because that's what I do. So, I read Bride by Ali Hazelwood. I was taken a little bit by the hype. And I thought, you know what? Everyone says that this is like the romance author for those who don't like romance typically, contemporary romance. You might like Ali Hazelwood because her writing is essentially traditionally published fan fiction. So it has like a different sort of vibe about it, I guess. I don't know because I did not read one of those standard ones. I read a vampire werewolf with some things that are from the Omegaverse, I guess, but having watched Lindsay Ellis's like 3-hour long video on the Omegaverse drama a few years ago, I don't know if this is peak Omegaverse. I think it's just what people who have maybe a brushing knowledge of, like myself. I don't have that much knowledge. I just watched that video and was like, oh my god, this is a whole community of people. So, anyway, that being said, I put myself on the library waitlist because I was like, I'm not buying this. Though I kept seeing it at Target and I kept being like, oh, I should grab it. But I was like, no, I'm gonna wait for the library. So I waited and I waited. And then my library purchased like 15 new copies because there was like 300 of us on the wait list. And I got it well earlier than I was expecting to. So I added it to my TBR this month. And then I had like 5 days left to read it. So I read it. So actually, I think it doesn't return until tomorrow, so I'm gonna pull it up on my Kindle real quick. Okay, so I have my notes for you, which I stopped taking notes at some point because I was like, okay, I'm just gonna read this. I'm gonna like read. Okay, so now that I have this pulled up and I have my notes pulled up, this is like a 400-page book. It is a vampire who has to marry a werewolf to make this like tenuous peace bond, essentially. So Misery Lark is the daughter of the like head vampire for their like area, and she is told that she has to marry Lo Moreland, who is the alpha of the north. No, he's not the northwest. Is he the southwest? I think they're the southwest, right? The southwest pack, because he has to go to the northwest pack leader, which is apparently in California. And as a Pacific Northwesterner, I was like, why would you go to California to meet with the Northwest Pack? Just a little annoying thing but that's not the point. Okay, so she gets told she has to marry him. She's like adamantly against it. She hates her dad because her dad made her already be the collateral. So she's like told that she's going to be a collateral again, and it's like basically they do like a swapsies, and if one of them, like if something happens to Misery, then something will happen to the werewolf collateral as well. So it's like mutually assured destruction. So she's already been collateral with the humans. Her dad decided that it would be her when she was younger, and so she spent 10 years from like 8 to 18 living with the humans. And then when she went back to live with the humans, her vampire clan, like coven, rejected her. And so she went back to go live with the humans, and she's been like trying to fit in, but she's never really fit in anywhere. So she's like a tech girly. She does like some computer programming shit. And she's told for 1 year she has to go be Lo's wife. And she doesn't want to until she hears his name, and that like sparks something for her, and she's like, I'm gonna do it. So, yes. So this is gonna be a little spoilery, basically. I'm not gonna spoil everything because I'm gonna keep this short. But essentially, her bestie, who was brought in to help her adjust to the human world, she was like adopted into as like Misery's sister, essentially. They were raised together, they're the same age, and she has gone missing, and she had initials and a last name written in her planner, L.E. Moreland. And so when Misery hears Lo Moreland, she's like, that name was in her planner, I'm fucking going, because she's been trying to find her best friend, Serena, I think, but I could be making that up. It's probably in here somewhere. So she takes the cat that Serena had just got a couple days ago with her, and she goes and moves in with this werewolf guy. And basically it's like he's weird with her from day one, complains about her smell, all of this stuff. And then of course she's like trying to like sneak around, and as books that follow a formula tend to go, she gets caught. He decides that he's going to help her, because they have like a mutual interest in finding out what's happening, and to protect someone that's close to Lo, and they fall in lust and then affection for each other. So with lots of smutty scenes throughout. Well, not throughout. They didn't happen until I think like the 50% mark, and that's kind of when I stopped like really marking things, because I was just mostly skimming at that point, because there were just a lot of like steamy scenes from that point on, which I was prepared for. I knew this was going to happen. So overall I rated this book like a 3.5, because I didn't hate it. I didn't hate it, but it was definitely not for me. And the things that weren't for me, I actually gave it a pass on, because those are like part of the genre. So I'm comparing this to the Mercy Thompson series, because that is the werewolf shit that I am familiar with. Werewolves and vampires and shifters and fae. It is an urban fantasy. It is actually set in Washington. And so the love interest there, Adam, is actually the leader of the Northwest Pack, which are based in the Tri-Cities outside of Spokane. And that is, I lived in Spokane for my undergraduate degree. I was like, that's kind of why I was like drawn to it. It's actually set in an area I'm familiar with, and like it, yeah. So that's my only like kind of window into what is happening here. And I am aware that these are very different stories, because essentially the Mercedes Thompson books are, Mercy is a mechanic, she's a shifter, she was raised by werewolves, so she's kind of introducing us, she's like our guide through these like werewolf happenings. And in the first book I was kind of like, I don't think I like this, and I almost didn't continue, but my boyfriend was like, give it till book 3 please, because I think you'll start liking it then, because she does improve in the writing and the stories weren't bad. So I also gave Moon Called, then Bloodborne. It's not Blood Called. Moon Called is the first book in that. I gave that a 3 too, but I continued with it. So a 3.5 is not bad. For me, it just means it's not for me. It didn't do anything egregious. It's just I can live without it. So it was not bad, but it's not something I'm going to go reaching for. So in Moon Called, the werewolves are so territorial of people, and they're like big alpha male bullshit stuff, that toxic masculinity rampant, and that is not for me. I don't enjoy that, but I understand that with the genre, and from my understanding of the Lindsay Ellis video, this is what people who read Omegaverse, which is werewolf porn essentially, people who read this, that they like that I'm gonna protect you, you're mine, you smell like mine, I'm gonna like mark you and all this stuff. It's not necessarily for me, but I will say if I had read this in my 20s, it might have been for me, because I was a very different person in my 20s, and yeah, I might have enjoyed this, but as a nearly 40-year-old woman, I was like, I am too old for this possessive bullshit. But I do think that the Mercy Thompson series improves, it gets better, and they kind of call it out, and Mercy's like, to her love interest Adam, she's like, you can be that, but I am my own independent person. And he is like, I would not love you if you were not your own independent person, because that's what I love about you. And so they have this like kind of understanding that he is going to be protective, but he is never going to tell her what to do, because she is going to do whatever the fuck she wants regardless. And they have like actual communication about it. And I think if this continues as a series, I feel like it may do that. It may continue as a series, and it may also improve in the communication. But I did kind of like that Misery is also semi-independent. One of the first things that I actually marked was in the prologue. And it was basically Misery and Mercy. I'm gonna mess them up at some point, just so you know. She's like talking about the werewolves and giving us like a brief intro into werewolves, basically. Werewolf 101. I'm sorry, my allergies. I took a pill, and I took it a few hours ago, but the cottonwood is going wild here, and my eyes do not like the cottonwood. And I went and worked my horse, and I'm allergic to horses. So, anyway, she says, she's like judging low, and she's like, pictured him in a home gym, tirelessly working on his abs. I was like, Mercy would be proud, because she makes jokes about the werewolves always working out and things like that, but in that it's explained they have a really high metabolism, they have to constantly do things, they're just like fidgety fuckers. And so I was like, oh, okay, like we're gonna go with these tropes that at least I kind of understand, like these behavioral things. So my next one was like the next page later, and I was like, okay, I'm kind of here for the sarcasm, because she's like, that's why, in a heartwarming display of trust, my father demanded an all-vampire armed security detail for the ceremony, which obviously didn't happen. So it was just like, I was like, okay, we're gonna have like a sarcastic character. I'm here for sarcastic characters most of the time, as long as they don't do things that bother me. See my God Killer video, where I'm like, I can't handle edgy for the sake of edgy. So at least Misery has a reason to kind of be standoffish and judgy and sarcastic. And it is like actually explained that the vampire culture is to be kind of cold and sarcastic. It is, so it kind of makes sense a little bit too. Like they're just not very warm physically and emotionally people. And I was like, okay, I can deal with this. This is fine. It wasn't over the top, I thought, in the way that it was done. I did mark one thing, which I will get to later, in a little bit, because like I said, I'm not going to do this, a whole bunch of this. Okay, so there was one thing where I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. So still in the introduction, this is page 8. Father whispers, lips barely moving, he is very dangerous, do not cross him. And the, like, internal monologue of Misery is just what every girl wants to hear 10 feet from the altar, especially when the hard line of her groom's shoulders already looks cross, impatient. So we're getting like an idea of who she is, how she reacts to the world. So the character introduction part, I actually was like on board with. It was quick and easy to read. It's very popcorny. I didn't really have to like pay a whole lot of attention. I didn't have to invest a whole lot. And with my work schedule right now, it was really actually nice to not read something that I had to invest in. I have put down Jade War, picked it up, put it down, picked it up, put it down, because my brain is, I don't have brain left by the time I get home from work. And so this was something where I could just sit and just go with it. And it was like kind of cringy and kind of stupid, but there were things that made me laugh. And so that's kind of why I gave it that 3.5, is because it made me laugh, and not like at it, it made me laugh with it. Like there were times where I was like, oh, like the smut was so cringy to me. To me, like some people might like it, but to me, I was like, sometimes I was like, ugh. But there was some of it too where I was like, okay, that could be kind of hot. I can kind of see that. But some of the language, some of it was just like, I did appreciate though, because this is something that gets me. And I've read a couple of romances. When I was in high school, my best friend read romances all the time, and so she had me read like 1 or 2 of them, and they weren't for me. She was like trying to find one that maybe I would like, and she read Nora Roberts, and so she gave me like 2 or 3 different Nora Roberts, and one of them I kind of liked the story, and it was like set in like a boggy area, and it was kind of supernaturally, and I was kind of okay with that one, but I was like, why are the sex scenes so cringy? And it's romance books, all the ones that I've read, have this thing where they'll use like language for like male genitalia. They'll use like words we use today all the time, right? But when they're talking about female genitalia, they will not. Like it's like other people have made these comments too, and it's like things like the bundle of nerves, the apex of my thighs, the my center like thing, right? And I was just like, but this one used anatomical language, and I was actually kind of here for that. And it's probably just because Ali Hazelwood is a scientist, and so she's like, I'm gonna use some scientific language, and we did get it. And I was like, okay, I feel that a little bit better. Like I prefer that type of thing. So I was like, okay with the language used, at least. It was just the scenarios that she was describing. I was like, okay, I guess for some people, not for me. Okay, so I did I did highlight this part in chapter 1. She was like, other people's approval is a powerful drug, and I was just like, oh, I feel this in like my academic soul. So this is where I kind of was like, okay, this is a character I might be able to get on board with, like, and it just, she was relatable in a way that was kind of nice. But there were other moments where I was like, okay, do we have to do that? Like, we did the like holding your breath type of thing, and I was like, ugh. But we didn't do the get giggly because the man is hot, and I was like, okay, thank you, because especially when you have like a character, like when you have a teenager and they're giggly because the love interest is hot, sure. But when you're like in your mid-20s, can we not giggle every time an attractive man looks at us? Because why? So, anyway, let's see, what else do I have here? I did like there was a shot fired at Twilight. No, we vampires don't pulverize in the sun like glitter bombs. And I was like, ha, yes, appreciated that. She did use vampires with like a Y, which in certain nerd culture has a different connotation of a regular vampire. But I think she kind of did it, I don't know if she did it to be different or if she did it because her vampires are different in that they are born, not made. So, and the werewolves are the same way too. They're born, not made. So she's kind of made her own lore here. And that is one of the things that I wasn't sure I really liked. I was like, can we at least stick to the consistent lore somewhat? But but again, she did make a whole plot around that. Like, there are children in this, like children werewolves and children vampires and things like that. And so I was like, okay, I guess, I get why you did it, but I still don't know if I'm happy about it. But that is, to be fair, that is just like the nerd, like the D&D nerd in me, okay? That's what that is. We'll just say that that's what it is. She's talking to Lo's younger sister, who she says is anywhere from 3 to 13, and I'm like, okay, I get not knowing little kids' ages, but you can tell a difference between a toddler and a teenager. Like, that is an actual obvious difference. I get not knowing the difference between like 2 and 6. Like, I didn't until I started having like nieces and nephews. I was like, how do you guys all tell how old kids are by looking at them? And now I have like 7 nieces and nephews, and I'm like, okay, I've seen the projection of aging. But even when I was like, I don't understand kids' ages, I could still be like, oh, it's like a toddler. Oh, that's a middle schooler. Like, you know, there's a big difference there. So I was like, okay, we're exaggerating. So she's talking to her, and the little girl asks her, like, if she dies when she goes into the closet at night or whatever, and then comes back to life, and because she sleeps in the closet because there's no sunproofing on her windows. And these aren't like immediately burst into flames when the sun touches them. They get really bad burns. And if they can die, but yeah. So she asks her, and she's like, is it true that you were bitten by a rabid dog and are now a furry who froths at the mouth during the full moon? And I was like, lol. Like, I found that a little bit funny, to be fair. Like, some of the things, that's why I said, like, it's like she was like, followed it up with, I'm trying to be mean. Like, because she didn't want to, like, she didn't want it. It had the big man trope, I'm guessing. Like, we talked so much about how huge his hands were, because he kept doing this thing where he would, like, put his hands on the walls on either side of her, and that's part of the thing that put me off. But that's a personal thing. And then, like, she's like, oh, my husband wears size 14 shoes, and I was like, okay, this is the big man thing. And then we started talking about how huge his hands were, and Misery's also, like, 6 feet tall, so if she's like, I'm 6 feet tall, he's not much taller than me, but his hands are, like, huge. And I was like, that's okay. She's obsessed with peanut butter, and she's like, I found a jar of creamy peanut butter in my fridge, and I was like, bitch, who puts peanut butter in the fridge? And then 2 of my friends were like, but one of them is because it's organic, and the other one is because she says she forgets she has it if she doesn't put it in the fridge. I also know that I can be, it's one of those argument things, so like peanut butter in the fridge or not, so I'm aware of that. But yeah, she's like obsessed with peanut butter. It's like her shame. And then so she's like friend. She kind of becomes like tenuous friends with this younger werewolf, Alex, who is like also a coder, software guy, but he's like very afraid of her, like worried. So they're like the vampires and werewolves don't like each other in this world as well, which is pretty consistent in most stories. And he's like worried she's gonna like bite him, and so she like fucks with him quite a bit. But Lo is a techno illiterate, and there was like a joke about papyrus, and I was like, oh my god, like I was just very happy there wasn't a Comic Sans joke in here, otherwise I would have given it a higher rating. The little girl hugs her all the time, and she's like, we don't always have to hug, and I was like, and I felt that in my soul. Like I don't like hugging. So again, it's things where I was like, oh, I kind of identify with this like main character because like of certain things. And then she's like, I'm not a bouncy person, and I was like, me neither. Like, so the part where I started getting like irritated was like, Misery gives this speech about how she needs to be involved in this thing, and she like goes off on why she needs to be involved, and Lo turns to her and he's like, that was a badass speech, Misery. And I was like, I couldn't tell though if he was being like sarcastic and ironic with it, or like saying it, or if he was like literally, because I was like, I have a thing with people who call things badass. Like, I do it ironically sometimes, but because it reminds me of like 2007 Dane Cook fans, like guys who thought Dane Cook was like peak comedy. It just reminds me of that. So they're like the guys with backwards baseball hats shooting Jaeger at the bar. Like their favorite drink is a Jaeger bomb. Like that's all I can think of. So my like opinion of Lo dropped quite a bit. And it kind of, I stopped. That was chapter 13, page 182. So about halfway through, and it was right after that we started getting like spicy scenes and stuff. And then I think from there I counted like 6 or 7 spicy scenes, might be 6. And I did appreciate though some of the stuff like everything. There was consent with things, like they were like asking like each other, like, can I do this type of thing, like, is this okay, are you okay, like, and I was like, okay, checking in type of thing. And I like that. Misery had never done anything because of her like isolation, and that was not like a factor in it, which was kind of nice. Like for character wise I understand why, but I also was like, why, like, I don't know. There was a point where it could have been done weird, but I feel like it also could have done, it was weird to have it brought up and then not have it be like, it was nice to have it not be a thing, but it was also like, I was like, also like, are we just going to ignore the fact that she's completely new to all of this? Like, to all of it. Like, that was kind of odd. We just kind of ignored that she was new to it, where I felt like there should have been a little bit more care about it maybe, but also it was kind of nice to just have it not be a thing. And then like when she like really wanted to have like intercourse, she like kept asking like, can we have sex? And he was like, we have been, everything we have done, because they'd done like other stuff, is sex. And I was like, okay, actually that is a positive view that I like, because it's like, why do we like focus so much on like the P and V part and not like everything else being like, and that's like me like getting over the purity culture that I was raised in, where like that was the bad thing, and I'm like, but all these other things are like the same thing, like what is the difference? And so I liked that we were like, we had that discussion, and so that was kind of like a positive thing for me. There was no shame around anything that they did, which was nice too. I was like, okay, I like that there's no shame, like there's no like, there was like, you know, like, oh, okay, that was kind of awkward that we were supposed to not like each other and now we're doing this, and that is like a normal kind of awkward, like socially, you know, like what is this now? I appreciated that, that there was no like, I feel shameful, I feel gross or whatever, for even though what they were doing was actually forbidden, like essentially because of the interspecies relation, like on the global scale, it was technically like forbidden, and there was still no shame around it. So I was like, I appreciate that aspect of it. So that's kind of like my overall takeaways from it, was for a stepping out of my comfort zone book, it wasn't terrible and I didn't hate it, but I still don't like romance that much. I don't mind romance in books, but what I didn't like the main thing I don't like about romance is the formula that it follows. I don't like third act breakups. I don't like them. I don't see the point, especially in one like this where we have a mystery in the background happening. We have something happening. We have things for tension. We had so much like interspecies politics. Why did we need that third act breakup? I didn't. And why do we need the like, I'm gonna lie to you about my feelings to protect you? I don't like those things. And those are things that are so common in the genre because every book I try has something like that in it. Why do we need to do that? When there are other things happening in the story, why do we need to create tension with that? And I don't like the, I'm lying to you about my feelings to protect you because I'm worried that, like, if I tell you how I feel, it'll sway how you feel. I don't like that. And that is way too common. Like, from what I have read, it's way too common. So, that's where I'm at. I am exhausted. So, I'm going to leave you with that. That's Bride. And I do like the cover. There is an artist that I want to point to. And I can't remember her name right now, but I will put it here because I have a tarot deck by her. And every time I see this cover, I want it to be by her because the artwork is kind of like from a distance. It's like similar, like structurally. And I always want it to be that artist when I get close to it, and it's not. So I really want to, like, I want that artist, like, so it always reminds me of her, so I'm going to put her up here, and I can't remember her name right now just because I had the worst long week. So, on that note, I'm going to go. I recommend stepping out of your comfort zone and trying something new because it did make me finish a book. I finished this, like, 400-page book in 4 days while I was on, like, 4 hours of sleep a night and working 14 hours a day. So, that's, on that note, I'm going to go, and I'll see you soon.